third match on the card is our United States champion, Dusty Rhodes, and the Road Warriors, with Paul Ellering taking on the Powers of Pain, which made up Warlord and the Barbarian. They had Paul Jones in tow, and Ivan Koloff joins them in a barbed wire match. Tony, can you imagine a barbed wire match airing on television in 2017? That just seems so far-fetched now. I mean, that lets you know how long ago this was. Any fun memories you can share about barbed wire matches for Jim Crockett?
Well, it shows you how television has changed, right? If you say, can you imagine a barbed wire match in 2017? I love barbed wire matches because I love to see guys bleed. And, there's a lot of the blood that you saw in barbed wire matches back then was blood the hard way. Do you understand what I'm saying by that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. They actually would cut themselves on the barbed wire instead of having to blade themselves. And I think if you'll recall, in that match, there was even blood in that match. But back then, and even as we got even further, they would pull away when you saw blood, to the point to where in this match, JCP and Dusty took a lot of heat from the Turner people about having blood on TV because there was some blood in that match. Love barbed wire matches, though. Loved it.
This match is set up from an angle where the Powers of Pain and the Russians had dropped a barbell on Animal during a weightlifting challenge competition on TV. So Animal wore a protective hockey mask as a face guard here in the match, and Dusty Rhodes wore the Road Warrior paint. The barbed wire wasn't utilized a lot in the match, but Dusty still bled like crazy, which was hardly a surprise.
Why, can I say this? Do you know why Dusty a lot of times bled like crazy and a lot of times these guys would bleed like crazy? Sometimes it was because they couldn't help but to. Because if you do enough blade jobs on your forehead, a lot of times you just get slapped, you're going to start bleeding.
Yeah.
Sometimes the blood was inadvertent. I'm not saying it was here, but that's just the way it was in the business. Sometimes guys bled because the skin and the scar marks on their forehead were so thin, they just take a blow to the head or a head to the turnbuckle, and you open up a cut.
Barbarian goes for a flying headbutt and hits the Warlord by mistake, giving the good guys the win after an Animal power slam. After the match, the bad guys have a remarkable recovery and rip off Animal's mask and start attacking him. Meltzer gives the match a less than stellar review at just 1 star. And Tony, fair or not, a lot of fans believed at this point Dusty Rhodes was past his prime, and they don't really see him in this top position. So they pushed back when he won the Bunkhouse Stampede, and now he's here, seemingly riding the coattails of the Road Warriors. That's what a lot of smart fans are going to say, to try to piggyback their momentum, even going so far as to paint his face. Do you remember at this time there being significant unhappiness or resentment towards Dusty for seemingly finding a way to put himself in a featured position? Or is that all sour grapes and his big crowd reactions warranted the push that he was giving himself?
Well, the old thought back then was that a lot of times bookers who were also wrestlers would put themselves over because they knew what they wanted to do.
Right.
They didn't have to explain to anybody else. It was easy to put themselves over or put themselves in the feature event because they didn't have to explain it. They just did it. And that was, I can remember there were a lot of unhappiness, but not many people spoke out about it, but Tully Blanchard did. And I remember we were leaving the Bunkhouse Stampede at the Nassau Coliseum, and I was in the limousine with Tully and Arn, and I guess Flair was there too. And there was a lot of grumbling going on, as well as a lot of drinking. We were heading to the Hemsley Palace, and this was right after Dusty put himself over the Bunkhouse Stampede. You remember that?
Yep.
When everyone, and even me, and I was the ring announcer that night, even I thought that Luger should go over because Luger's looked like to be our next big star. So if Luger's going to be our next big star, to me it was logical that he would go over, but Dusty went over and won the boot. And I'm not going to get the wording right, but I remember asking Tully, I said, what's everybody so pissed off about? And he says, I think that Dusty Rhodes should book himself against Dusty Rhodes so he can put himself over against himself and he can go fuck himself. Something like that. That's what I remember it being verbalized on the way back. So, yeah, there was a lot of unhappiness at that time. There was no doubt about it. I thought putting himself over in the Bunkhouse Stampede and not Luger, to me, seemed kind of out of place. But, you know, unlike you and Dave Meltzer, I don't think I was an expert in the business at that time.
Well, I was 6, so I was not an expert.
See, I knew there was a 6-year-old prick in Alabama second-guessing everything that we did. I knew that.